All right, so we are into our next week of figuring out how to get across the finish line on research proposals, and along the way, tackling important objectives like your research questions, on the way to writing things like your objectives section or subsection. And we've started to take a look at what might just the easy, low-hanging fruit, early, get some ball rolling momentum going on just chapter level headings, right? So super quick, early assignment. How is this going so far? I've seen some things starting to roll in on the submission drop boxes for the course website.
I sent an email to you, not on the course. Is it okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's always okay. If you don't feel like rooting around on the course website, you can always just email me. That's fine. I may not see that immediately, but I will get there. All right. Okay. We've talked a little bit about the annotated bibliography. I wanted to, as we get our...
I'm not sure I understand.
Dang, girl. All right. We can get the projector up and running here. Take a look at some example annotated bibliographies, or I'll just walk my laptop around so you can see it if the projector is going to be an issue. But of what to do in bibliography, just to go back over that briefly, is the minimal amount of work and sort of metadata and content recording that you need to be useful and effective in that way. You're going to read so many papers across your classes. If your research group has anything like a journal club, where you as a research group read one or a couple of research articles in your group's area of work per week, that's a very common and useful sort of habit or practice or bit of professional hygiene. That having that annotated bibliography lowers your stress level by getting it out of your head. You spend effort, you spend energy, you spend your stress hormone budget or your decision fatigue and working memory upkeep on stuff like the annotated bibliography. What's the important blip of information that I need out of this? What's the insight? What's the question that this raises but doesn't answer? You spend that and you keep spending it every day, kind of silently in the background of your mind, until you get it out into your external brain, your annotated bibliography. So, an annotated bibliography, and some of you have already sent in some of this, so that's awesome. Like this. This is just a plain text file.
Yeah.
Each one of these, in terms of writing the annotated bibliography entry, was ideally about 30 seconds of work. Right? You're not typing an essay here, because you're going to have to actually type, whatever's useful that you deem is worthy of your effort to include on your proposal as you go. So you don't ever want to write anything twice. You're just capturing the citation information and a 3-word phrase or a 1-sentence importance or something like that. And that's it. Stop and move on to the next thing. That is enough. When you're doing thought work, like research, like science, it can be very difficult to know when enough is enough. And in thought work, across all of the different thought work fields like software writing, research, other kinds of writing, even creative writing, it can get into a place of, I'm like 90% of the way there, but I just want to tweak this a little bit more. I just want to tweak that. I want to rewrite this little paragraph here. This chapter doesn't flow right. It just doesn't feel right. At some point, unless you cut it off and push your partially fledged work out of the nest to fly, it's going to stay there in that stage forever, and you just never finish, right? So perfect is the enemy of good enough. We have to get to a place of being comfortable with good enough. So deadlines are a great way to do that. A lot of people use deadlines to work as hard as you can on something, do your best on it, and when that deadline comes, send off what you got, because it's never going to be perfect. It is just never going to be perfect. But it can be good enough to accomplish its task and purpose pretty early on, quite frankly, especially as you get more and more skilled at it. So where we're going from annotated bibliographies, start throwing stuff into these. Has anybody had a chance to start practicing the forward and backward citation searches? So pulling up Google Scholar. We kind of just mentioned that at the end of class last time. Is anybody not clear on what that is? We can just go through an example together.
Please repeat.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Okay, and I apologize. This projector is, maybe the bulb was burned out or something. I'm not sure what's going on, but gonna sit in front and see what's going on with it. So, if you want to move closer to see, that is okay. So if you go to a very useful website like scholar.google.com, and so we can increase the zoom here so everybody can see okay.
Are you good?
Oh, no,
Please come, I'm not waiting.
Everybody see okay? All right. Let's pick a class research topic, and if you're smart, you're gonna say what your topic is, so that we accomplish like one moment of search for your work. Anybody? Nomination?
Prescriptive file management.
Okay. Do you have a particular author in your field that is pretty good along those lines? Like useful along those lines? Yet.
Like Michael Menton?
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead and type in the author's last name, first name, and just a key phrase.
Yep.
All right, so we are crucially on the university's wireless network, Eduroam, and organizations like Elsevier and other publication houses are looking for our IP address within known IP ranges that are paying thousands of dollars a month in subscription fees, and they'll automatically give you access to full text where we have that license, or at least extended abstracts or whatever. In some cases, the supplementary data files published with the study more recently and stuff like that. If you're doing this at home, the same search will typically return the same set of results, but without the direct link to the content, so way less helpful. You can go through the library's website to get yourself set up on the university's VPN, or virtual private network, which basically creates a traffic tunnel for your internet searches for publications to show up on the university's IP range, and therefore these links just magically show up in the sidebar from that, okay? Now, Google is also indexing professors' personal websites where we'll put like draft manuscripts or publication proofs of a manuscript that's like 99% of what the actual published article is, but it's not the thing, so it doesn't apply to the publication company's copyright controls and stuff like that. And if you find something in this forward or backward search that you really like that you just can't find access to for free, email all of the authors and be like, wow, I really love this study. I was just really curious. I'd love to know some more. Could I get a copy of the galley proof or the publication or whatever? Most of the time we're going to be like, oh, this person's trying to get a free article off me. And most of the time we're going to be like, that is so flattering. Let me give you that one and like 5 others because, wow, I'm needed. Okay. no, a lot of people, we're justifiably really proud of the hard work that we put into these, and so it's a very healthy and normal thing to strike up a conversation with study authors that you are looking to emulate or sort of springboard off of, or what have you. This is a very common conversation to have at a professional conference. You're in somebody's session and they're talking about a cool research study that hasn't even been published yet, and they're saying, we're working on the draft manuscript now, and you say, man, I would love to use this right now. I understand it's not even published yet. Can you send me a copy of, whatever draft, whatever shape it's in? I don't care. I think it's fantastic already. And then turn that conversation into hey, I'm getting ready to graduate soon. I'm working on my dissertation draft or my thesis draft right now. In 6 months I'm going to be done. And I see from your byline that you're working with such and such organization or at such and such university. Can you just keep me in mind if you guys have any job postings coming up soon? And most folks are very, very happy to do that. In fact, they want you to bring up the fact that you're kind of in the market for a job, because it's so hard to hire faculty members. It's so hard to hire good researchers. It's so hard, if you're the Forest Service, to spend literally a year hiring a PhD or a master's level practitioner, because it's a big federal agency. It's slow, and you can't compete with a private company that is ready to hire you on the spot. And so that sounds like an exaggeration of timeline, but it's really not. By way of example, I came to work at SIU through a conversation at a conference in Vermont. The conference was run by my old master's advisor, who was getting ready to retire at the top of his field, and so he was like, yeah, we'll have this big international conference at my place. We'll throw a big party for everybody for a week. It'll be awesome. So a bunch of us in that network, flew back into Vermont to go do that. And we're at one of the after plenary sessions. Plenary sessions are the big meeting sessions where everybody at the conference is there, instead of in the various different tracks and split out or breakout sessions. And after each one of those big plenary sessions, typically there's like a mixer or a social hour or some kind of open bar event where everybody just stands around and chats and gets to know folks and networks and stuff like that. And so I'm talking with a couple of my grad school buddies, and this guy I'd never met before, Dave White, walked up and said, hey, you're Logan Park, and you're from Virginia Tech, right? And I was currently a PhD student there. So I said, yeah, hi, nice to meet you. Who are you? And he said, well, I'm Dave White. I'm also a former graduate of the Virginia Tech forestry program, and I just really enjoyed it. So I just wanted to introduce myself to some other fellow Hokies. Sorry, the Virginia Tech version of the Saluki. And oh, by the way, I was just talking with somebody else who came through the Virginia Tech forestry program when I did, a gal named Erin Seacamp. She works over at SIU, and she mentioned that they're getting ready to hire somebody into their forestry program. And I saw your talk on your research earlier. I think you might be a good fit for that. So why don't you go talk to Erin over there and just mention your name. Put a face to the resume you're going to submit to her, right? And just shake her hand and get to know somebody. We're all just people. And so I did that. Had about a 10-minute long conversation with Erin Seacamp. 10 minutes was all it took because I didn't really know her that well, so we just talked about my area of research and how things were going at SIU and what's her area of research and what are you hoping to get into next and so forth. And several weeks later, she sent me an email saying, hey, this is the job posting for this position that's about to get listed. I'd love to see your application packet on the list. And 5 months later, I did the 3-day long interview, and several weeks after that, negotiated and signed the contract, and then several weeks after that, defended my dissertation, and 1 week after that, I was teaching here at SIU. So it's tricky. It takes a long lead time to hire somebody on. That conversation really got started in like October of the year before the August I started teaching. And that's just kind of how it goes. If you want to work in academia, again, with private industry, it's much faster turnaround, but it's also much higher competition and, you know, better pay and stuff like that. So it's just, you know, what do you want to aim for, and how do you get yourself in front of the people who are going to be making hiring decisions? And in that case, Dave White was basically just an unexpected miracle, right? He just showed up and was like, hi, let me aim you at a really cool job opening because I'm a recreation ecologist, and there were 6 of us in the world at the time that I graduated. Not a lot of job openings for that. So this happened to be exactly what I needed and looked for at the exact moment that I needed it. So all that to say, contact people, get in front of people.
Excuse me, a recreational ecologist.
Not a recreational ecologist, an ecologist of recreation.
So what is the difference between ecologists of recreation and recreational forestry? Because my home university is running that program like for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of familiar with this concept, and we have tons of students, so I'm just kind of, are you sure that you have only 6 persons?
At that time, yeah. This was more than 8 years ago, because I'm old now and tired and sad.
I don't see that. Don't lie.
Well, I appreciate it. But yeah, so the difference between a recreation-oriented forester and a recreation ecologist is a recreation ecologist is studying the human dynamics of impact formation as a consequence or function of recreation behaviors, typically at major national parks and forests. That's where the use pressure is very high, or tends to be. And then a forester who works on managing recreation is deploying and designing trails, maintaining campsites,
infrastructure.
Like yeah, so the recreation ecologist is doing the science that informs and guides the management, not the day-to-day management. There's a separation of duties there. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
May I ask a kind of off-topic question?
Not a problem.
What are some of your thoughts around national parks and land use?
That's a very big question.
It is. It's a huge question.
Sure. So we can probably lump a lot of the concerns into 2 things. One is the very, very uneven use or preference for certain parks over others. Like in the United States, we call them the crown jewel parks, the Yellowstones, Yosemites, Acadia, Great Smokies. Parks that have, in some cases, a lot of space, but up to 10 million visitors per year, every year, in ecologically fragile years as well as more robust years. So the density or the use pressure is very high at those places, and we have to make some real hard trade-offs and sacrifices. That's the fundamental work of a recreation ecologist, to help figure out what we can kind of sacrifice a little bit, honestly, to make sure that the uses that we can allow are sustainable and increasingly resilient in their use. And then the other big one is climate change. So if parks in the United States are managed to a preservation standard, that is, in many cases trying to restore them to a pre-Columbian ecological structure and function and species composition and so forth, quite frankly, climate change or climate forcing or destabilization, however you want to characterize it, if you want to be politic, you would say it's moving the goalposts, right? What is even possible to achieve at these parks is shifting spatially. It's moving north and upslope, or up elevation. And if you're not being politic about it, you know, the climate destabilization is taking a huge shit on, you know, what everybody's been working on for about the last 105 years in national parks management. Like, some of those things are just flat out impossible now. And
Especially when you add traffic into the mix of things.
yeah, but, you know, park management is a slow-moving beast. It's a part of forestry, and we're working on 25-year, 50-year, 100-year timescales, and things are already shifting away from, you know, well away from what we were trying to manage towards. So that's really an issue.
Very short add-up question.
Yeah.
On the same topic. So in your opinion, what do you need more? Increased amount of protected areas or increased management level of protected areas? Currently, in your opinion, increased amount of areas which are protected or increased maintenance level of areas which are already protected?
I see that as a false dichotomy. It has to be a both. And most of the effort in setting aside large chunks of intact land, big parcels, big national forests or wildlife refuges, or wilderness areas in particular, that work has been done. You know, the Wilderness Act reached its 50-year anniversary in 2016. No, 2014. 14. Park Service in 2016 was the centennial. And that's cool. But there's recently been a lot of really cool effort by, at least among the national parks, to set aside and recognize completely other ways of knowing, other ways of thinking, other philosophical, if you want to think of a space as a philosophically different or a thoughtfully different area than like a traditional, obvious, or stereotype of a national park. So we have things like national heritage corridors now, which protect and commemorate and interpret and make accessible and recognizable to people in deeply urban landscapes. So like Cuyahoga Valley is an industrial river valley. The Blackstone River in the Northeast is an industrial, like part of the history of the Industrial Revolution was built, a bunch of early factories on that river. So the Park Service, in recognizance of the idea that a lot of people are not close to, either physically or mentally close to a place like Yosemite, and it's a huge ask for them to travel to a place like Yosemite. It's a huge commitment and expense and chunk of time. What if we had a bunch of places that were literally close enough you could walk your dog there? You know, for anybody who lives in Boston.
Which still provides that awe, but in a different kind of way.
Yeah, and helps that awe get attached to things like, look what people have done, not just what ecosystems have done, or what God or gods have done, depending on your theology. And also things like cultural or social GIS. So talking with indigenous populations, Native Americans, First Nations folks, mapping out things like, what does this valley mean for your peoples? What are the, you know, what's the creation story attached with this mountain ridge or peak, or this particular spring, or this cave? And and try to get a sense beyond what our sort of Eurocentric, Euronormative sense of history and meaning are for the United States, what is now the United States. Because, you know, a lot of indigenous folks still live in these places, and they're kind of they can be kind of invisible in some ways. So the Park Service is really trying to do better on that. So a couple of different answers to your question there. All right, so we're talking about forward and backward lit searching, and we've got an example. So we have a topic, we have kind of an early clue on maybe one author. So from there, we can look at what this particular journal article cited itself. So backwards referencing. Okay. So we want to read through this as an article itself, figure out, okay, what's the 1, 2, or 3 word or sentence sense of what's critical out of this that I need for my dissertation proposal in your case. Throw that in the annotated bibliography, and while I'm reading through, if one of those critical chunks of info isn't a function of this study, but it's a function of a study that this study cited, well, I probably want to go back and look at that. So if that citation was so important to me that somebody else cited it, I'm just going to scroll down to the works cited section. We'll just kind of pick one at random here. And copy that text, right? So there's 125 possibilities of goodness here.
Yay!
I'm gonna just copy the text of the reference, go back to Google Scholar, and in a separate tab here, I'm gonna just search for that one. Okay. This is from 2011, a little bit further back, and let's see if we can find anything. Oh, there's the PDF. Cool. All right. So that's a backwards citation, and because a paper that you think is important to you cited this, that's an early vote for this older paper potentially being at least somewhat important to you as well. Now, you don't probably have time to do this for all 125 citations.
Most likely.
Just out of this one, right? So this is like exponential expansion. So for each paper, if each paper gives you 125 more citations to chase down, that's 125 for one generation, and then the next generation back, 125 squared, right? That's over 10,000 additional citations to go after. Now, obviously not all 125 are going to be directly relevant enough to spend your time on, so you want to think very, very carefully about which ones you do a back reference search for, because the older things are, the less likely they are to be tightly coupled to your particular purposes for your current work. On the other hand, as you start reading through more and more of these papers and doing forward and back references, we'll get to the forward references in a sec, you're going to start seeing some of the same things cited over and over. So if in 8 of the last 10 papers you've read, all of them cited the same author, at some point, typically a method paper gets a lot of citations in clusters because, you know, this sequence of studies, they all use the same or similar technique, so they're all going to cite the same originating paper for that technique. That's probably a paper you want to chase down, and it will be very easy to chase down because clearly 8 out of the 10 of your previous read studies are chasing down that particular citation and they're using it, right? So that's a pretty good vote for you to use it as well. What this means in terms of impact factor is that winners win and losers lose. Papers that get cited tend to get cited more and more and more. And papers that don't get cited don't have that same sort of exponential expansion of citations pointing back to them, okay? So winners win, losers lose. It's kind of a self-reinforcing thing. Is that fair? No. But if you want to go into professional research as a university faculty member or running your own consulting group on science and research, you want to be aware of that dynamic. You might put out 50 papers over some period of time, like a decade, and 2 of them get hundreds or thousands of citations, and all of the rest get like 2, and both of those citations were you, you know? And that's fine. That's just how it goes. It's an unevenly distributed sense of what is important enough to cite. Okay, so that's backwards citation. Find a paper that you like, go to its references section, look for anything that really popped out in the article that legitimately made you think, don't force this, legitimately made you think, wow, I could spend 60 seconds chasing down this paper and just kind of scanning through. And that's often the amount of time that you can give it, because not all of them are going to be a hit. So forward citation is going to be, in this particular case, we'll go back to your first paper. In Google Scholar, that's captured by the cited by 8 thing. Now, a very new paper, if it's just come out in 2024, right, it's been out a matter of days. So that cited by number is going to be very low for a very recent paper. Very recent papers tend to be very useful, but they tend to provide fewer forward citations. A relatively recent paper in the last 5 years, still pretty fresh in the world of research, but it's had a little bit of time to start getting cited by other folks. So for example, this one was published in 2022, written in 2021, researched in 2019 to 2021. It's been cited by 8 folks already, so you click that link, and now we're skipping forward in time. This is only going to be things that are published in 2022 and beyond. So this is very fresh stuff, and might even include the sequel to, or the next project by the same people, that might even be more helpful or more targeted to your work, or not, okay? So forward citations give you cutting edge stuff, tend to be cited less, but tend to be very up to date and like much more laser focused, if you can find them, on things closer to your topic. Things that are older tend to be a little bit more diffuse, but cited by a lot of other folks, a lot of votes of confidence, so to speak, in the usefulness and hopefully accuracy and correctness and ethic applied to that particular older study. Okay? So, backward and forward searching. Very, very quickly you can put together a huge list of citations that you want to chase down, and depending on your temperament or your wiring, have a list of 1,000 citations that looked pretty cool for some reason at some point. Whether or not you get to them, at least you have that list and you don't have to go like reading back through stuff again because, oh man, I know I read that somewhere, but I didn't capture it. Other folks are wired to curate a much more list of, no, these, I'm only gonna record the forward and back references on my list of things to actually chase down and spend any of my effort and time on if I'm pretty sure it's gonna be useful. So if you're a lumper or a splitter or sorter, either way is cool. Just be honest with yourself about that. If you're really a sorter, but you are putting together a lumper list, it's going to be stressful because you're going to look at this huge thing and be like, I'm not actually going to do all this, so this list is meaningfully. I've put spam on my own list, so to speak. Unsolicited, less useful stuff. Okay? Questions, concerns, confusion about forward and back reference searching?
Forward citing, when you're looking at a paper, are people that cited that specific paper, and backward
Yes.
citing?
You're moving forward in time with it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And backwards just the ones that paper cited?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So forward citation is absolutely a new digital tool. Back in the bad old days when it was all paper journals and going to the library and Xeroxing or copying paper copies of stuff, it was a good time to be in paper making, but a bad time for being in research because like you had to literally read the table of contents of a journal following a particular interesting publication, or contact that author and ask, what else, are you aware of that has cited your paper? And that person isn't even typically aware of that all the time. So this is something that's new and very, very, very helpful. Forward citations are.
And so you, excuse me, so you made your annotated bib in a text file, or do you recommend we use EndNote or Zotero or something? Are those different things? Am I conflating the two?
I'm one of those dirt worshipping hippie, free as in Libre, free as in beer, like open source software guys. So I don't want to pay an annual check to EndNote for the privilege of using their software. I'm more of a Jay-Z middle finger to the law kind of person, So I just use a text file. But that's not the right solution for a lot of people. My wife is a very sort of organized, closed-ended person, and she doesn't want to spend 1 extra second on worrying about ugly-looking text files. She wants it proper, everything in its box and squared away in a database with the PDF of that publication attached to that entry. So when she clicks on the entry, it brings up the PDF, and she can glance back at the PDF while she's writing on 2 screens or whatever. And that works for her, right? So there are free and expenseful versions of any way of accomplishing this process. I go with the absolutely idiot-proof version. She goes with the Ferrari version, right? You know? Yeah.
Yeah, so one of my friends introduced me to this Mendeley app.
Yeah, Mendeley, sure.
You can actually like put in your PDFs in there,
Mhm.
and you can actually make a note in these PDFs. For each PDF you put
Uh-huh.
in there, you can actually make a note. So, like, can we use this as annotated bibliography?
Absolutely. Absolutely you can. Yeah, and it's worth, I don't know, sometimes it changes year on year. The university will pay like a university-wide license to
Yeah.
one or the other or several.
That's right.
And then there are the open source ones or just the flat file, as it's called, text. So it's worth checking the Office of Information Technology's site, and they'll have software for students, for faculty, for family members, for personal use, for professional use. There's all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah, I think it's SIE's affiliates. It's this Mendeley.
Awesome,
She has an
great.
account for them.
Okay, yeah. So try it out. Report back. Let us know. Let us know what it's really good at, and if there's anything where it's kind of a pain in the butt, let us know that too. Right? That's valuable. There's no perfect software. It's just a bunch of tools. So don't have any religious belief about any of it. Just use what works for you. Okay. Cool. All right. Any other questions about forward and back referencing? Okay. You're gonna do a ton of this, so it's luckily pretty straightforward. And get comfortable with this. Do it to the point where it's boring, not stressful or effortful.
Something to see your annotated bibliographies that is sort of completion or point.
Emphasis on any. Yeah. So I care.
Fantastic.
I care that you have it. It's never going to be finished, right? So there's no like final draft to turn in for this class on that. That would be ridiculous. So like, bring in your laptop. We'll have a couple of different points throughout the semester. We'll just say, hey, next class, bring in your annotated bibliography, whether it's a paper pad list or a text file, or if it's a database, bring in your laptop or tablet and just show me the screen, and I'll be like, looks great. Well, I'm just gonna look for some kind of text on the page, right? So as long as it's functional for you, that's all I care about. But no, there's no expectation in format or content. I don't care what font you use. That obviously doesn't matter. Yeah. Well, there you go. Just as a quick side note on that, think very carefully about what fonts you want to use and the font size that you want to use and the font spacing that you want to use on your working documents. So for example, like Times New Roman is a classic, right? We've all used Times New Roman way back in the day. Back when like page counts mattered. They don't anymore. But back when they did, folks would choose a font that, in the same number of words, pushes you over onto that next page like 2 sentences, so you can get credit for one more page on a writing assignment without any more effort and stuff like that. But not all fonts are created equal in terms of cognitive load. So we could think of this as, how many calories do you have to spend to parse one block of text in a particular font according to font, face, size, and the spacing. And Microsoft over the years has kind of played around with what works best. As it turns out, cognitive load is significantly reduced when you're reading printed text, period, versus on a backlit screen. Okay, so e-ink paper is not a backlit screen and functions in your brain like printed text. You remember that better. You can think critically or diagnose problems in something that you're reading easier on printed paper. And we need to pay attention to that because you're going to be reading a lot. You're going to be asked to remember a lot. And you're going to have to think on your feet and answer pointed questions during your defense very occasionally about things that you read or relied on as a crucial source. So, we want to use a serif font. A serif font is good for retina screens and printed, okay? So when the pixels are so small on the screen that your eye can't individually differentiate one pixel from the next, it looks like printed. It's very high resolution. That's about 315 pixels per inch for those of you at 15 inches for those of you who are keeping score. Most modern smartphones have retina displays. Some computer monitors do, not all. When it is a retina screen, choose a serif font. Those little feet or peds on each of the letters give your eye and your brain, more importantly, more individuation or resolution or difference or conceptual separation between this is an S and this is an E. There's just more visual information to process that. On a lower resolution screen, you want to use a sans serif font. So sans serif font does not have these little feetsies on each tail or fin or leg of a letter. Okay? In addition, bigger is better up to a point. You're looking for about 80 to 150 characters or letters and numbers and spaces per line. If it's wider than that, your eye can get lost on which line you're at when it snaps all the way across your visual field to start reading the next line. And you have to spend a lot more cognitive energy reading very long lines of text. This is why newspapers, textbooks, and most journal articles are broken into very narrow but very tall columns. It's very easy for your eye to scan up to, we actually read a couple of words at a time, not by the individual letters, but by the shape of the phrase, okay? So, we want typically 1.15 spacing, which is now the default in Microsoft products, so that your eye has enough space, enough white space in between one line to the next, so that you can see the shape of each phrase that you're reading at a time. Speed readers are trained to read up to an entire line at a time. And you can read hundreds and hundreds of words a minute that way, and meaningfully retain and understand what you're reading, not just dragging your eyes across the page. But that is a skill and a literal muscle development that you need to do in order to train up to that speed. For most of us, we don't need to train as professional speed readers, but we do want to lessen or eliminate eye strain as much as we can. So make sure your contacts or glasses prescription is up to date as well. For font selection, serif or sans serif in terms of general family, but for those of us who are aware of or dealing with dyslexia, there are specific fonts that are designed to help counteract those particular brains' tendency to transpose letters or rotate letters or reflect letters across an axis by having typically the bottom of each, looks like the bottom of the letter is kind of bold-faced. So this actually becomes a very narrow triangle, this lowercase l, for example. And some students have found, even if they're not dyslexic, that it feels like a brain massage to read a page of text if you've copied and pasted it into a dyslexie or open dyslexie type font. It's just kind of a miracle thing for some people. For other folks, it just looks like ugly Comic Sans. And if that's you, try it out. You don't have to impress me by using it or not using it, but see how your brain works. We want to get to know that a little bit, okay? Beyond that, we're going to be pretty well situated to munch through a lot of dense technical science writing. If you can get font, family, and specific font, the size, a little bit bigger is a little bit better. Look for line widths that are looking like a newspaper or over tall, that is taller than they are wide, and spacing at 1.15 and so forth. Okay? Yeah.
So you're saying do this for our writing? Because sometimes like PDFs, like they already have their own formats. Like you couldn't change like font to dyslexia, could you? If like you needed to.
You could. Can't you copy and paste the text out of it? Now, I would only recommend copying and pasting the text out to transpose into dyslexia. If you go home this afternoon and over a hot chocolate or a mocha or hot chocolate added to coffee, a poor man's mocha, and you try this out and you're like, oh my God, where has this been all of my life? Then it's worth the effort of, copy pasting text across from a PDF into just a scratch document. You're not going to save that or anything. You're just going to keep the PDF. Otherwise, that's just an extra step that's going to be kind of a pain in the ass. So don't worry about it. But try it out, right? That's been such a game changer for a few people that it's worth mentioning to everybody. And don't be afraid whatsoever to zoom in and out on things. Sometimes when we're in the zone and you've paid a bunch of money for a fast, fancy computer with a high resolution display, and so the text is like minuscule, you're paying a price for that cognitively as well. So you don't want to just assume that the default presentation is the most workable for you. This is about ergonomics, right? So when you're writing stuff, you don't want to be like hunched over and dehydrated and all of that. Same thing for reading. You want to set up the physical and mental apparatus so that you can do your best work in the best way, right? Whatever posture, whatever lighting level, whatever color temperature on the lighting, whatever font, etc. Sound, lack thereof, sound canceling, whatever you need, okay? Cool, wow. We didn't get as far as I wanted to today, but that's awesome. I feel like we covered some important stuff, yeah? All right, cool. Let's reconvene on Thursday, and we'll see you then.
I do have a question
Yeah.
about